Hey everybody, this is Guy and welcome back to my channel here at that Kilted Guy videos. In part one of this series of skim coating a popcorn ceiling to get rid of it, I showed you how you don't always have to sand it to get rid of it, and you don't always have to scrape it to get rid of it. You can also skim coat it with a layer of mud and retexture it, and we're going to show you how to do that next. Hey everybody, and welcome back to that Kilted Guy videos here on YouTube. This is your resource for home improvement and DIY project teaching videos, because it's my goal to teach you guys how to do your own home improvement projects, to empower you to take pride in your workmanship, save some money, and we're going to show you how to do it right. And if you enjoy this video, be sure and subscribe, give us a thumbs up. And if you feel that we've helped you out with your projects, consider joining us on Patreon, where you can help support our efforts to put out more videos for you guys for as little as $3 a month. There'll be a link in the description. And down in the description will be some other good information about our website, our Amazon store, where you can pick up all these tools and supplies, and more information that'll help you out. Hey, I also like to take just a second to say thank you to all the veterans out there and all of the active duty service members currently serving. As you can see, I was in the Air Force and I'm proud to have served. And so I just wanted to take a second to say thank you, and I salute you. Thank you for your service. Okay, in the previous video I showed you how to mask off, like here. Then I talked about whether or not you should sand or scrape before you skim coat. So now we're ready to get into the skim coating, so let's get going with that. Okay, now when you're coating this, what you want to do is put it on just heavy enough to cover everything without a lot of chatter marks. Chatter marks look like this, and that's simply caused by your knife literally jumping and chattering over the popcorn. So you want to be sure and put it on thick enough where you don't get very much of that at all. Now if you have a hard time with that, just go ahead and put it on best you can. You may have to just come back, sand it, and put a second coat on, and that'll do it too, but I can get it done in one coat. So just finish running out this first pan, and don't worry about getting it on too smooth at this point. Just get good coverage here. That was a really full pan, so you can see it only did roughly 16 square feet with one pan, and that's on the thinner method. So if you do it the thicker method, you'll only get about half that much coverage per panful. Okay, all you're trying to focus on here is get it on fairly thickly. Don't worry about the lines. If you get any voids, you can fill those in. And here's a little slow-mo of how I spread the mud, so maybe that'll help you a little bit. But basically you're just trying to get it on here kind of crudely, and then you can see I'll go back over it a little bit and level things out a little bit. Smooth it out a little bit more, just get things a little bit more even before I break out the magic trowel. When you're going over it like this, just use a pretty light touch at this point. To spread it takes a pretty firm touch, but to smooth it out takes a very light, gentle touch. Okay, now I'm going to go over it with this magic trowel, which is going to smooth it out even more. It'll smooth out those lap marks and just leave it quite a bit smoother. Okay, at this point, whenever you're trying to do this smoothing action, you want to use a pretty light touch. You'll usually lean your blade over a little bit more so that it's a little flatter to the surface, and a fairly light touch compared to spreading it. When you're spreading it, you actually have to push pretty hard to get it to spread when it's thick and using a white knife. Make sure you don't get too far ahead of yourself spreading the mud before you actually go back and smooth it out. And if you feel like it's a little dry, you could mist a little water on it, and that might help. Okay, we'll do a little time lapse here, and I'll dream that I was this fast. But actually, this whole process you're going to see in this time lapse, I'm thinking, if I remember right, it took me about 20 minutes or so, but I can't remember for sure. I've done this over 30 years, so I can do it fairly fast, but it might take you way longer, so just be prepared. Okay, here's a little close-up video walkthrough showing how it came out pretty smooth. This is plenty smooth for the skip trowel we're going to be doing, and I purposely leave lap marks versus voids, but all of this will sand out very nicely, and it'll come out plenty smooth with just a little touch-up needed for some of the bubbles and such. But I made a discovery here. I actually haven't used a magic trowel much at all. I recently used it in one of my skim coating videos, and it worked pretty dang good. But in this case, it didn't work quite as good, and it was because the mud I'm using here is thicker. And on thicker mud, you can see how it's kind of draggy, and it just doesn't leave it as smooth compared to here. You can see where I did it with a metal blade to smooth it out, and it left it much smoother. Now here you can see on the right hand side is the metal blade, and on the left hand side is where I used the magic trowel. Now for you guys, if you're novices and new to this, I would still recommend it, but it may leave it a little bit more draggy. So just be aware, if you're good at a knife, use a knife, otherwise magic trowel. I also want to point out, notice if you look at this closely, you can see the popcorn texture behind my mud. That's perfect. You want complete coverage like that, but a little bit of that showing through that unevenness, that's okay, because we're going to sand it and it's going to come out nice and smooth. Now one final thing is, you notice where the arrow's pointing here, that is called a lap mark, and that's what you want to leave behind instead of something like in this illustration I put together here. You notice how there's kind of a low area there. So in this case, you would have to sand it down to the red line, which requires a lot of mud removal and a lot of sanding. But let's compare that to a lap mark like this. You see how the lap mark sticks up in the air, but everything else is basically flat. So all you have to do is sand off that little high point and you're done. So it sands way smoother, and you'll just get a better job. And one way you accomplish that is experience, but concentrate on putting just a slight amount more pressure on the leading edge. So on the trailing edge of your knife, which would be, say, on the left side if the mud that you're spreading is on the left side. On the trailing edge, you leave slightly less pressure, and that gives you these lap marks instead of a gouge. Okay, I'm going to show you how it looks the next day. I did part of it one day and part the next. You can see the popcorn on this side, and notice how it just suddenly becomes smooth. It's really hard to show because there's not really many defects the way I do it. That's what you're shooting for. Okay, we'll let this all dry overnight. Everything is skim coated. You can kind of see in the background, it's a nice white. I'm going to walk you through it here and show you what it looks like. Okay, it's the next day after all the skim coating, and you can see that we got it all coated now. Now let's take a look at how smooth it's coming out. As I walk you through here, you're probably going to have a hard time seeing anything because there's not much, but like right there's a little bit we got to sand. There's a low spot we may have to touch up, but I'm walking along here and it's kind of hard to find stuff. There's a few little berries we got to sand off, and then there's some edges where I transitioned from like this mud to that mud, so that edge right there we'll have to get to blend in. Now here is where we went straight over the popcorn without sanding it or scraping it first, and you can see it came out a little rougher. So these sections where we pre-scraped and sanded is a lot smoother. So today we should just have to sand this and a little bit of touch up and it's ready for texture. All right, now that you've seen that, what we're ready to do is sand it. And if you put it on smooth, like you saw in the video here, you won't have that much sanding to do. So we're mainly looking to knock down those little goobers you saw and lap marks. Now I'm going to sand this with 150 grit sandpaper today. You could use 220, but I wouldn't go any finer or any coarser than 150 grit. Now, couple other words of advice here. You can do this with a pad sander. Absolutely don't try and do it with a sponge sander. Don't try and tackle anything this big, period, ever. But if you really want to, you can do it with a pole sander like in this picture here, or you can even do it with this sander here I'm going to show you. And this one is one I would recommend. It's one of the easiest ones for you guys to use. It doesn't flip as easy and it really does work pretty well. That would be this one. This is a radius 360, so it's a circle sander. And the reason is it doesn't have straight lines to gouge. If you got straight lines and you don't know how to run them good, you can easily gouge lines into your mud. This one won't do that, and it doesn't flip as easy. The rectangular ones, they work great, but they sometimes want to catch an edge and flip while you're sanding, and that can cause these to dig into your mud and do some damage. So if you're gonna sand by hand, this is what I recommend, and it attaches to a normal painter's extension pole, or you can buy the cheap wooden one. I like the extendable version so I can put it at the length I want. I'm not stuck with that fixed length. But beware, you sand with this thing overhead, you absolutely need to wear a dust mask, and you're gonna get this all over you. You're gonna look like this guy here, and I've looked like that guy right there many times. I don't like it anymore, so I have a better setup, and I'm gonna show you that here in a second. Even if you wear goggles, you're gonna get this in your eyes, and it burns, and it's gritty, and it's nasty. You can see he's got red eyes in that picture. I've been there many times, and if you try and wear goggles, it takes about 10 seconds, and you can't see out of them. It will coat them. And so there's not really a good win-win situation to manually sanding overhead. It's terrible. So I recommend you either buy or you can go rent this sander that I'm going to show you here. This is my drywall sander setup, and as you can see, it's pretty rough looking. It's filthy. It's been used a million times and rubbed hard and put away wet. It's got broken parts on it, but it still works great. And that attaches to this circular sander on a pole here, and this is all Porter cable. So basically you have this 9-inch sanding disc here that spins in a circle, and as it makes dust it collects it around the edges here, and it's actually very efficient. You'd be amazed. I'll show you in the video. I don't even wear a dust mask a lot of time. On this one, when you're sanding this intense, you might need a dust mask because sometimes it can't quite keep up with the volume that you're producing. A couple other things about this sander. I would wear hearing protection. It's not that noisy, but you got that motor right there next to you, and you want to protect your hearing. Also, one big advantage to this sander is this. This also has a brush around here, so it's stirring up the dust so that it can vacuum it better, so it doesn't leave near as much in those pinholes and on the surface. And if you just simply sand it with a regular sander, the dust actually gets into those bubbles. Then when you try and fix it with mud, it just falls out. You have to actually vacuum it out or brush it off or just keep messing with it. So the dust actually will hinder you. Plus you're leaving the whole ceiling dusty, and that's going to hinder your texture sticking, everything. So you really need to dust it off before you do any texturing in that. Well, with this sander, it kind of dusts it for you as you go. I'm going to sand now for you with this vacuum sander, and that's partly so you can see how well it works. And then we're going to go ahead and take you all the way through the texture, which in this case will be a skip trowel. Okay, you can see how that did a great job. I stood right below the sander while it was running on purpose. I don't normally do that. Not a bit of dust on my face, none in my eyes. So there's some cheaper versions of this. Like I say, I'll put those links in the description for you. If you're just gonna do it once in a while, that's a good option. Or you can usually rent these. The sander is usually about 30 bucks. So definitely do that, but let's compare, see if I can show you the dust on camera when we use one of these. Okay, I hope you can see that. You don't want to do that, so I'm not going to do any more. And I'm going to get back to sanding, and then we'll move on to the texture phase right after this. And coming up in part 3 of this series, I'll show you how to do a skip trowel texture, and I'll discuss some other options like knockdown, orange peel, and so on. And we will wrap this project up, so I will see you on the next video. Take care.